Can a rice dish become a tool of empire? We rarely think of everyday food as a political instrument. Yet in multi-ethnic states, especially those engaged in nation building, even the most ordinary ingredients can be enlisted into ideological service. When identities are being engineered from above, culture is not merely expressed, it is curated, standardized, and sometimes rewritten. This video examines how a traditional Central Asian dish, plov, became part of a larger effort to reshape cultural memory across the Soviet Union. In the 1930s, the Soviet Union embarked on a project to engineer a new kind of human being, the Soviet person. This was more than a political or economic vision, it was a cultural experiment. Under Stalin, the USSR sought to erase class, national, and religious identities in favor of one unified socialist identity. Later, Khrushchev would articulate the ideal as a new historical unity of peoples of different nationalities. By the end of the USSR, people began to ironically call it Homo Sovieticus. In effect, this was a nation-building project, and like all nation-building efforts, it needed cultural tools: language, clothing, education, but also food. Every strong national identity, after all, rests on a shared cuisine. Anastas Mikoyan, a high-ranking official close to Stalin, had traveled to the United States in 1936 and observed American food industries. He returned not only with the ideas about industrialized food production, but also with the realization that cuisine could be standardized and centralized, just like factories and schools. He even imported American hamburger-making machines, but beyond that, he applied the same logic to the USSR's diverse food cultures. And so, in 1939, under the direction of Anastas Mikoyan and by Stalin's order, the Soviet state published the Book of Tasty and Healthy Food. This seemingly innocent cookbook was far more than a collection of recipes. It was an ideological instrument, a blueprint for Soviet life at the dinner table. The Soviet cookbook was not an ethnographic catalogue, rather it cherry-picked recipes from across the vast Soviet republics and reshaped them into a Soviet cuisine. Dishes like plov, manti, kebabs, chibureki, and lagman, long associated with specific regions like Uzbekistan, Georgia, and the Caucasus, were incorporated into this canon. The names often remained, but the cultural context was stripped away. This process went beyond labeling. It also reshaped the food itself. Recipes were simplified, adapted for mass production, and stripped of their original spices and techniques. Plov, traditionally a labor-intensive dish involving layered flavors and precise timing. Moreover, plov was considered a festive dish, served on the special occasions such as weddings, birth, and so on. In USSR, it was reduced to a generic rice and meat stew that could be prepared in military canteens, factories, or school cafeterias. Efficiency replaced authenticity. In modern terms, this is a clear case of cultural appropriation, but it was appropriation not for profit or fashion, but for ideological purposes. The Soviet state didn't just borrow culinary elements, it rebranded them into a new cultural identity, one that served its political goals. It was not about celebrating the Uzbek or Georgian identity, but about absorbing it into a larger Soviet nation narrative. In my opinion, Mikoyan's work deserves serious recognition. His primary achievement wasn't cultural policy, but the modernization and industrialization of the Soviet food system, an enormous challenge, especially in the aftermath of the 1932-33 famine, which he handled flawlessly. My goal here is not to pass moral judgment, of course, but to analyze how nation building and cultural standardization operated through food. These processes coexisted with real innovation and logistical success. One of the reasons food was such a potent medium for this cultural engineering was its everyday nature. Unlike literature or music, which could be restricted or censored, food is a necessity. It shaped habits, preferences, and even identities at the bodily level. Controlling food meant controlling everyday life. Another crucial layer to this story is the role of industrialization. The Soviet kitchen, especially in ideas of an early Soviet state, was not just a domestic space, it was a part of planned economy. Recipes were rewritten to match the capacity of collective farms, factory kitchens, and food processing plants. This was not only about efficiency, it was also about ideology. The kitchen became a site of socialist modernization. Cooks were expected to cook efficiently and nutritionally. The idea of a mother preserving traditional knowledge was first replaced by the idea of a feeding and supervisory state, and in the later Soviet period, by a housewife relying on a book that contained one's ethnic recipes, but using ingredients that were at hand and more available right here, right now. Yet beneath this drive for unity and modernization was a quieter story of erasure. For many communities in Central Asia and the Caucasus, and as a matter of fact, for all of us, food is a form of cultural memory. It connects families to their ancestors, rituals, and landscapes. Soviet appropriation didn't destroy this connection outright, but it weakened them. Over time, younger generations grew up with versions of traditional dishes that had been reshaped and detached from their roots. Ironically, many people who grew up in the USSR remember these foods fondly. The state was successful in creating emotional and nostalgic attachments to its versions of national food, but what was lost in the process was the recognition of where these dishes came from and the deeper meanings they held in the original cultural context. This phenomenon was mirrored in other cultural domains. Soviet architecture, for example, incorporated national and usually religious ornamentation into state-approved designs, and I already have a video just about that, the link will be in the description. But this is not a story of total loss. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, many of these culinary traditions have experienced a revival. In Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, plov is once again a symbol of national pride. Old family recipes are being rediscovered. Restaurants emphasize authenticity. And in 2016, UNESCO added plov to its representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity, explicitly as a part of Uzbek and Tajik cultural heritage. This recognition is more than symbolic. It marks the reassertion of cultural ownership, a reclaiming of identity after decades of flattening. And while Soviet cuisine still exists, and is still beloved in parts of the post-Soviet world, the pendulum is swinging back toward authenticity. The food tells its story again. The story of Soviet plov is a reminder that food is sometimes not just a food. It is also can be a battleground for identity, memory, and power. This video was made based on my short video from Instagram and TikTok. There I post similar content, but in a shorter form. Links will be in the description. Don't forget about my Patreon, where you can thank me by subscribing for only $3. Also make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Goodbye.